So my name's Mel Cooke, and Rob and I are going to be talking about a recent book, Brokering Britain, Educating Citizens. This was a collaboration between practitioners and researchers, and about the teaching and learning of English for speakers of other languages, known as ESOL. So it has strong connections to the previous speaker. And it's also about the relationship of ESOL with the complex notion of citizenship. This collection raises questions about the nature of citizenship, integration and community, language and multilingualism, and the role of ESOL and ESOL teachers in the citizenship transitions of migrant English language learners.
Hang on. Oh.
Excellent. Go for it. Previous one, Rob. Thanks. So ESOL is an important element of adult education, and debates in ESOL also resonate in the broader sector. How does provision fit into the national policy picture, for example? What's the relationship between policy and practice? And what are the opportunities and constraints of different kinds of provision? In most of the UK, the class, ethnic and cultural backgrounds of ESOL students is highly diverse, and classes take place across all sectors of adult education: FE, local authority, third sector, charity sector, and informal settings. In our book, we explore ESOL specifically as a site of citizenship education, but not in the formal top-down statist way implied by the Life in the UK citizenship test, which we'll talk about in a minute, but in other senses of citizenship, i.e. as a process which is democratic, dialogic, and participatory. The book consists of 8 key case studies of ESOL projects, which in different ways are concerned with fostering the development of active, sometimes activist, diasporic citizens who are developing their voice, agency, and collectivism, as well as their English language competence. Not all of the teachers who feature in our book necessarily use the term citizenship, but we wish to explore the concept as a useful heuristic for ESOL work, and perhaps even for adult education more broadly. ESOL is highly politicised, and for many years has been implicated in policies concerning immigration, security, nationalisation, and citizenship. The most well-known of these was the introduction of citizenship and language testing in the 2002 Nationality, Immigration and Asylum Act, which stated that everyone applying for British citizenship had to show a sufficient knowledge of English, Welsh, or Scottish Gaelic and life in the United Kingdom. This was extended in 2007 to all those applying for indefinite leave to remain. Predictably, the citizenship knowledge required of the Life in the UK test is limited to arcane facts and figures about British culture and institutions, and it's been heavily lampooned throughout the years. However, for those people who were unable to take the test independently, classes of ESOL citizenship were offered in its place, at least until this route was abolished in 2013. Since then, legislation such as Prevent and the aggressive promotion of British values in adult education has continued to place ESOL and other areas of adult education as the main vehicle for top-down, government-mandated citizenship education. And politicians of all stripes have pointed to multilingualism as a threat to cohesion and integration. But this reveals clear tensions between the multilingual realities of the UK population and the monolingual, nation-state-oriented policies and attitudes emanating from government and public discourse. And it's this complex relationship between language and citizenship that Rob will expand on next.
Okay, so of course, language and citizenship have had a long historical association. So classically, Aristotle argued that it was our capacity for speech that made citizenship possible. And the ideal of citizens deliberating over the common good remains a compelling theme within citizenship theory, despite the erosion of the very notion of a common good by neoliberalism. However, this idealized relationship between language and citizenship needs to be set beside the socio-linguistic insight that language is not just a deliberative or transactional resource, but part of a complex fabric of status and power relations within and between communities and societies. Some forms of speech count for more than others, and there are high and low status languages, just as there are high and low status varieties of particular languages. Language ideology helps legitimate unequal forms of high status, second class, and non-citizenship. And this can be seen clearly in the strong relationship typically posited between national citizenship and a national language. So in the UK, speaking English is widely promoted as a marker of both national belonging and migrant integration, and a legitimate demand made of non-nationals seeking citizenship or long-term residency. Non-English languages and their speakers, in contrast, are frequently stigmatized as a threat to the integrity of national citizenship, as Mel noted earlier. And yet the notion of common language as an aspect of citizenship is important. But this does not necessarily imply a common language in the conventional sense of a shared grammatical, lexical and phonological system. There's no question participation rates and waiting lists attest to the practical benefits of ESOL provision, but speaking English does not guarantee equal citizenship. And perhaps we should think rather of a common language in more pragmatic terms. What do we want to do with the language? What do we want to express? What relationships are we trying to build? And from this perspective, citizenship is not predicated on a conventional common language, but implies a process, dialogic, deliberative, sometimes agonistic, even antagonistic, by which individuals and groups struggle to communicate their concerns about a world in common, drawing on the full range of their linguistic, including multilingual and other resources. As citizenship education, ESOL is about more than teaching English. Before we look at examples of case studies from the book, I want to touch briefly on how different ways of thinking about citizenship were useful in our collection. Before I do that, it's worth acknowledging the view that citizenship's democratic potential has been rather exhausted, that neoliberalism has hollowed out our democratic public life, and that democratic publics were never that democratic anyway, and that nation states are reinvesting in citizenship discourse, not to enhance democracy, but as a form of biopolitical governance. But let's look at three ways in which thinking about citizenship shaped the thinking in the book. First was the well-established distinction between citizenship as a status and citizenship as a practice. As status, citizenship is legally defined, state-dependent and exclusive by definition. Some have it, some don't. But if citizenship is a practice, something we do, people without legal citizenship status, including many ESOL students, can still act as and therefore be de facto citizens. And this distinction opens up the possibility of non-state-centric, non-mandated forms of citizenship. Citizenship is the democratic, dialogic, participatory process Mel referred to. And there are certainly many examples of refugee and migrant groups engaging in civic and political life in ways that challenge the right of governments to exclude refugees or irregular migrants from welfare or legal protections or to deport them. Secondly, the notion of discitizenship, which originates with critical disability studies, draws attention to the ways in which our capacity for citizenship can be stripped away by non-recognition, stigmatization or discrimination, and so result in second-class citizenship or straightforward exclusion. And prevailing attitudes towards speakers of non-English languages in the UK are a case in point. Third was the idea of acts of citizenship, which we took from Engin Ushen. By acts of citizenship, Ushen refers to public acts through which individuals and groups contest their exclusion and claim new citizenship rights. The capacity for acts of citizenship, however, requires that individuals and groups have a sense of their own identity, value, and agency. Not all acts of citizenship succeed, but ESOL has a clear role, we suggest, in assisting its students to develop the capacity these acts require. An important implication of the approach taken in the book concerns the role of ESOL teachers. And we argue that ESOL teachers act as brokers or mediators between top-down prescribed ideas of citizenship and students' own experiences of citizenship that emerge within the classroom. And from this perspective, the ESOL classroom should not be seen as a site merely for transmitting mandated ideas of citizenship, that's the government proposal, but as space, at least potentially, for the formation and practice of new configurations of citizenship. And these in turn might shed light on our understandings of citizenship more widely. The case studies in our collection explore what this approach might mean in practice, and Mel's going to describe three examples now.
So the first case is English for Action, which is a London-based organisation. We've got all the links at the end for people who want to look them up. And this offers free ESOL to anyone who needs it The teaching approach is a participatory one based on the ideas of Paulo Freire and the work of educators such as Elsa Arbach in the USA, and programs such as Reflect, used in grassroots development projects in the Global South. The curriculum emerges from the concerns and interests of the students rather than from a pre-written scheme of work, and employs techniques such as problem posing, which encourage students to think deeply about the causes of social issues and problems, as well as their own attitudes and ideologies towards those issues, and what, if any, changes they would like to make. EFA is also involved in community organising around local issues such as ESOL funding, housing, employment rights, and so on. EFA staff and students organise in several ways: by joining existing campaigns or larger groups such as London Citizens or Citizens UK, by forming special interest groups on a local level, or through research projects which they carry out in conjunction with partners such as universities. The chapter in our book, by myself, Dermot Bryers and Becky Winstanley from EFA, is about Our Languages, a classroom-based project run by EFA in King's College London, which explored socio-linguistic knowledge with multilingual adult learners of English, a group who are often the subjects of linguistic research, but whose lived experiences and attitudes are often overlooked. During the project, students were engaged in discussions about understandings of multilingualism, about heritage language learning, family language policies, and language discrimination. This last theme we did not anticipate, but it emerged in the aftermath of the Brexit vote. To tackle the sometimes painful stories which emerged in this phase, we employed techniques from forum theatre. Students were encouraged to act out their stories and to imagine alternative ways of responding to their aggressors. In this way, the classroom provided a safe space to rehearse acts of citizenship, to resist discrimination, in this case against the use of multilingual repertoires in public spaces, thus potentially helping to pave the way for formal recognition, perhaps at some point in the future. Second case study is a chapter by Stefan Volmar about a group of newly arrived Syrian refugees in Leeds and how their use of smartphones and digital media is central to their sense of citizenship, both locally and internationally, despite not having full citizenship rights in the UK. Stefan shows how these digital citizens use the Facebook page of the Syrian community of Leeds as a platform for informal learning in order to build their own community and integrate locally, assisting newly arrived refugees, building relationships with other migrant groups, and sharing information about job opportunities, ESOL classes, and so on. Crucially, social media enables this diaspora to be highly effective local organisers, whilst at the same time maintaining contacts with home and with ongoing events in Syria. In particular, the chapter describes the work of the White Helmets of Leeds, a group formed after the death of the MP Joe Cox and named after a group working in Syria itself. The White Helmets volunteer their services and skills in the community as builders, plumbers, electricians, and so on, thus gaining valuable knowledge of the job market and the local economy and contributing assistance to individuals and communities in Leeds and the surrounding area. In this way, a group of so-called non-citizens reconfigure established notions of citizenship, both local and transnational, and both online and offline. And the third case study is about Beyond the Page, a group working with women in coastal Thanet, run by Sheila McDonald and Jodie Watson. Recognising that ESOL by itself does not necessarily result in meaningful integration and community cohesion, Beyond the Page is unique in offering a learning environment which invites all members of the community, that is, both migrants and UK-born people, as well as key local institutions such as schools and so on, to participate in identifying and overcoming their linguistic and cultural barriers. A further distinctive feature of Beyond the Page is their use of natural voice techniques along with ESOL. We've added a link to a video about this on the last slide because we don't have time to talk about it now. This has been highly successful in overcoming anxieties amongst low confidence students, bringing a range of people into learning and engaging hesitant learners. Recently, the group has started to become quite influential in Thanet, organising events in the area and bringing together various levels of the local community, such as head teachers and civic leaders.
Okay, the final chapter of the collection reflects back on the cases discussed in the earlier chapters, and in it we draw out 4 principles that we suggest should inform ESOL if it's to be consistent with the ideas of citizenship that we advocate. And these principles will be familiar to adult educators in other sectors and might be a fruitful theme for discussion later on. First, we argue that ESOL should be ethnographically informed. And by this, we mean that students' circumstances, trajectories, experiences, meanings, and the real life linguistic and social demands that they face should be at the centre of classroom practice and curriculum design. Second, ESOL needs a broad socio-linguistic understanding of language. Again, language is more than a formal system of learnable conventions. We need to consider how ideology is implicated in language and how English language education can perpetuate or challenge inequality and exclusion. Third, ESOL is political. It sits in a highly politicised space. But ESOL students, and teachers too for that matter, are not only objects of policy, but also agents with the capacity, like other citizens, to engage with policy and public discourse. And finally, and to reiterate the point, ESOL should be participatory and dialogic. Our practice should reflect the citizenship we aspire to, but giving students the chance to shape their own learning makes better pedagogy. And for that reason, if no other, is a basic principle of democratic adult education. I thank you, colleagues. And there's the links Mel referred to earlier. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob and Mel. That was really great. And again, I think it tied in brilliantly with the previous presentation too. So I just want to thank you very much for that.